Robert Plank Show, episode 87. Break out of your money zone and uninstall negative money beliefs using 80/20 and 10x. Welcome back to the Robert Plank Show. This is the internet radio program where we talk about building your own online business, and we come across obstacles all the time. We come across stress all the time in more ways than one. For example, it's really tempting and really easy to tell yourself that you're living the dream, living the lifestyle, setting your own hours, and not really putting much into your internet marketing business. By the way, when I say putting much, I don't mean putting in a lot of time. I mean putting in effort to the actions that matter. And it's a really easy, slippery slope to fall down where you don't put as much into your online business as you used to, or maybe you're not getting the same results out of those old actions as you used to, and you tell yourself that, well, you're avoiding stress, you're just going through the motions, and you're having a good old time. But then when the rent is due, when the taxes are due, when now money has to come back into the equation, now suddenly it's scrambling time. So what we want to avoid for you today are a couple things: are to avoid scrambling time, to reduce stress as much as possible, and have the stress instead be that you have to get a certain project done before a deadline that you set, otherwise you'll let someone down, as opposed to I've got to scramble around and find 50 grand out of thin air in the next week, because that's really not a good place to be. And many times we see it coming. Many times we know that in a few months we're going to have a big difficulty. And just from coaching clients and people like that, the response I get so many times is just, well, I don't have to worry about it right now. That's in 6 months. Well, what if for one day, what if for just 24 hours you pretended that that 6 month obstacle down the road was right now? And that way you could figure out what steps you need to take without stressing yourself out too much. So we're going to talk about breaking out of your money zone today. And we're going to talk about money beliefs. And this thing about the money zone and money beliefs is that T. Harv Eker has a concept called having one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake. And many of us, we get off to a great start in our internet marketing career. We buy some courses, we get a coach, we set up a website, we build a little bit of a list, we get some traffic cranking, we get an upsell in place, we get an autoresponder sequence on automatic pilot. Things are going great, but then we get that first little bit of money coming in, and then suddenly the mindset changes in a couple different ways. For example, if you're not making any money for the first couple of months of your internet marketing career, and suddenly you make $100. Well, my attitude is, if you just made your first $100, that's great. That is day one for you. You just made your first $100. But the usual reaction we get from people is, well, I just spent 6 months and then I only made $100 after 6 months. And they do all this math and they compare it to the pie in the sky dreams that they would have had. And they thought, well, by now, 6 months into the game, I wish I should have had $1 million and only have $100. And then they realize that, well, maybe they've been putting in, 10 cents per hour. And that is the absolute worst way to look at it. And then another thing that happens is that people aren't making that much money. Maybe they build up their business to 200, 500, 1,000, $5,000 even. And then we say, great, $5,000. Now you're making more money than you used to at your old job. But then they look at it and say, yeah, but I made $5,000 this month, but that's only $60,000 a year. That's just a average kind of job. And I mean, I could go on, and I think back to when I was younger, and there were a lot of internet marketers who were claiming that they didn't have a house payment, that they just paid their whole house off in one single payment. And I was angry at the time when I was in my early 20s that I had to get a mortgage, because I thought I'm just not as good as those guys. Only it turned out that, well, those particular people were lying and or no longer own those homes. But anyway, we're going to talk about 80/20, which is a concept that, I mean, it's been around, but Tim Ferriss made it really popular, the guy from the 4 Hour Work Week. And the idea behind 80/20 is that 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts, and then 20% of your results come from 80% of your efforts. So you have a couple different stages, and let me just kind of think of this on the fly. So you have your first stage where you're just kind of experimenting and you're throwing stuff at the wall and you're seeing what sticks. Then you have stage two, where you get your system figured out, where you say, well, there's all these things that I've been doing throughout the day. I've been putting out Kindle books, sending items into Amazon. I've been building my list. So let me list out or checklist out the steps that I'm taking every time I want to send something into Amazon's warehouse, or every time I want to publish a book. Let me figure out the steps, and then you could say that stage three is to then begin to remove steps. And remove steps can mean either that the steps themselves don't matter. So maybe I'm going to send some items into Amazon, and I'm going to have them label the items for me, because that way I save a lot of time. So we can remove the steps that are in place there, and maybe we can outsource some of the steps. Maybe we can have someone else mail our items into Amazon, and maybe even use some kind of software instead of running the books ourselves and things like that. So that's 80/20. And then 10x is an idea from a guy named Grant Cardone. He has books called If You're Not First, You're Last, and the 10x rule. So 10x means that any result that you want to get, you're probably going to have to put in 10 times the amount of effort that you thought you did. So if you want to have a business that makes $300,000 a year, well, you're going to have to put in as much effort as a $3 million business, or at least what you had planned on being a $3 million business. You have to be optimistically pessimistic in that way. If you want to have a product launch that gets you $100,000, then you're going to have to put in enough of the effort and enough of the correct actions and talk to the right people to have a $1 million product launch. And after refunds, after chargebacks, after your expenses, after affiliate prices, after affiliate commissions, after whatever hosting fees and advertising and things like that, well, then what is left is about 10%. Nothing wrong with that. You can't really change that, as long as you realize that that's basically the way that life works. Is that there's going to be a little bit left over for you, but it's kind of like speeding towards a brick wall. If you speed towards a brick wall, you're going to slow down and slow down and slow down and slow down until you almost get to that point. And so the reason why I like 10x so much, it's a really simple idea, is that if you put way too much, I mean too much in a good way, but too much of things in motion, a ton of a tidal wave of traffic. You do a product launch, you say, well, I'm going to run all these traffic sources. I'm going to contact 10 times the number of affiliates I thought I'd needed. I'm going to pile in 10 times the amount of things in the offer that I thought I would need. I'm going to put in a bunch more upsells. I'm going to do all these things to so that the end result is that I'm really stacking the deck in my favor, and I'm doing 10 times the amount of things that I thought I'd have to do. Jeff Bezos from Amazon, since we're talking about Amazon, says that entrepreneurs must be willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time, and Lao Tzu says that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So having said all that, we talked about money issues, we talked about 80/20 and 10x. The issue with the money zone is that many times we say that we might say all I've ever wanted is to make 10 grand a month. I know that early on, that's what I did. I was told I had to write down my goals, and I listed a couple things. I said I want to make $10,000 a month, and now that number, if I had a $10,000 a month, that'd be pretty small. I wrote down that I wanted to have a specific house, specific car. I got those things. So when we're starting, we think that all I want is to make 10 grand a month. We get to that $120,000 a year step, and then things slow down, and it seems like you're just crawling through mud to get even higher, to get to 2, 3, 400, and then you get to the point where you're no longer in survival mode and you're trying to build things up, and then you just get to the point where it's like you're competing against yourself. And the good news about the money zone is that it will never drop too far. It will never drop. Like once you get to say 100 grand a year and you have some of these assets in place, like a list, like products, like even joint venture contacts, if suddenly everything went away, if suddenly the internet entirely changed and you lost all your websites, you'd still find a way to scrape together a couple $1,000s a month. So the good thing about the money zone is that once you're in a certain zone, it's tough to fall out of the bottom of it, but then the bad part of it is it's tough to rise up above it. So let's talk about how to break out of your money zone, because a lot of it's internal, a lot of it's about bad beliefs and thoughts about money. So I want you to think for a second about the reasons that you became entrepreneurs, not just the material reasons like, travel, retire, better house, better car, that kind of stuff, but the actual things that those physical items got you. And I mean, I think that those reasons are things like, well, having more time for what matters, breaking out of the daily grind, having freedom to do what you want, where you want, set your own hours, having control over your own destiny as opposed to being an employee where at any given moment you could suddenly become fired. Less stress, less work, less doing a bunch of stuff that someone else wants, and to build something undeniably great with your name on it, or to crack the code or crack the nut or whatever you want to call it using your intelligence as opposed to just digging a ditch, to help others to build their business, to write a book, to lose weight, to change lives. And here's an important one, is to get the high score. So I'm a lot like this, and everyone who's successful has this motivation in them, and the ones that aren't are missing this. It's getting the high score, and that means that, well, haven't you ever played games like maybe you play like video poker and there's like a dollar value in video poker, right? You may start with $1,000 in a video poker game, and then you go up to 2,000, you go up to 10,000. You might be building a list, and you start a list with 100 subscribers, you get to 1,000, you get to 10,000. You might be building a Fiverr business, and you need to get it to X number of dollars. You're climbing in the podcast rankings, and you want to get to 10th place, you want to get to 5th place. So getting the high score right there, it's a weird, silly kind of drive, but that's one of many motivators that we have as entrepreneurs, and I would guess is one of many reasons why you quit your job and you're now building the online business that you want to build. So these are all motivators, but I think that when people come across difficulties, or they just kind of are about to give up on their business, or they can't break out of the money zone, these motivators get a little twisted and distorted. And by that I mean that I've had a lot of conversations with people who say that, well, I've been at this for 8 years, and their high score is the amount of time that they've been struggling with their online business. Well, I guess that kind of works because it's tough for someone else who's starting now to match your high score, because once you're at 15 years in, they'll only be at 5 years in, and once you're at 20 years in, they'll only be at 10 years in. Or there are people who say, well, I've invested $68,000.52 into my education, and I'm thinking, how do you even know the exact dollar value that you used to buy things? Well, because your high score was instead on how much money you spent. So instead of that being your high score, how about your high score becomes the size of your list? How about the high score becomes maybe not necessarily the amount of money in your bank account, because I mean that can get knocked out quickly from whatever expenses or taxes or things like that, and maybe monthly income is kind of on the right track. But what's really fun is to figure out how many sales of one of your products that you can make, because I mean then we kind of win there, right? Now we're not just only focusing on money, we're focusing on something that's directly related to money, and we can play the game and get the high score. But then we're not also falling into the trap of saying, well, I wanted to make 30 grand this month. Then they sell a website that was making them all their money for 30 grand. Well, this month you made your 30 grand, but now next month you're not going to have any money coming in. So I want you to think about that as we're ramping up today. What are the reasons that you became an entrepreneur? And maybe even list, if you're having trouble with that, list 5 things you wanted to eliminate or get away from by being your own boss. Maybe it's that you didn't like to wake up early, you didn't like to have to wear the same clothes every day, you didn't like to have to commute every day, whatever it was. List those things, and I mean, think about that. Think about what you were getting away from. Think about why you started, because there's something about that magic feeling of anything was possible when you started. And there was some moment, even if you consider yourself to be the most beaten down, sad, low self-esteem person, there definitely was a moment early on when you knew anything was possible. And it's only because you let yourself get beat down for whatever number of reasons. Maybe because you let someone else beat you down, or maybe because you weren't good at following your goals. You didn't have a very good support system, and then goal missed, goal missed, goal missed. Next thing you know, the goals don't matter. So the reasons why you're trapped in this money zone with one foot on the brake, I think that there are 4 main reasons. One is low self-esteem. So you think, or you tell yourself that you're not smart enough, or you don't deserve it, or that you're too old, too young. You're worried about change, or losing friends, or they're not going to be friends with you anymore. Or you compare yourself to friends and parents and you say, well, geez, if my income goes up to 500 grand a year, then I'll be making more than these friends and less than these parents, and suddenly all these areas where you are incomparable to others and not necessarily superior or inferior to others, then money's involved, there's numbers involved. Now it kind of is. Reason number two, a scarcity mindset instead of an abundance mindset, that in order for you to make money, it has to be taken away from someone else. And I say this a lot, and it's simply not true. Number three is that it's hard to speed towards a brick wall. You tend to you tend to ramp up when you have a specific thing you need to pay for, right? You need to pay for your daughter's wedding. You need to pay a bunch of taxes. You need to pay off medical expenses, whatever has come up for you. But then those bills get paid and you tend to slow down. Once the rent gets paid, then you slow down for the next couple of weeks till the next month. So the solution for that one right off the bat is 10x. And then the final reason why you're trapped in the money zone is a bad mindset and basically being programmed to hate life, because what we resist persists. And many times we look at, on say like on message boards, or maybe you look at someone that you don't like, but you tend to follow everything they do online. I mean, heck, maybe that's me for you. Maybe you don't like me, Robert Plank, but you're listening to my podcast, aren't you? You buy some of my products, don't you? You read my blog, don't you? So I find it really interesting that there are some people, and we all, I mean, I have people like that too, where we don't like them, we kind of hate them, but we also can't help watching the show. And then they're always in our minds. So it's like, well, maybe you don't hate that person very much, or you have some kind of a conflict there because, well, there's this person you hate, the thing you hate, but then you kind of want to become them as well. So we don't want to dwell on that too much, but what I want to tell you, first of all, is that meanings don't exist. Meanings are only there because you put them there, and whatever conclusions are, they're there because you came up with them in your own head. There is no absolute truth, only many truths that you have created. And so we're talking about this whole fear of money, basically, for lack of a better term. And so if you tell yourself that if you make a bunch of money, you'll be a terrible person, or that uh, money is the root of all evil, stuff like that, well, then that is the meaning that you have applied to that. If the meaning you've put into something is that you've been helpful and you suffered and everyone else is just taking advantage of you, that may or may not be true, but that is the meaning that you've assigned to it. Think about locating the source. Write down the specific issues that are holding you back from making more money. And not to put the blame on them, but just to identify them and then realize out of this, maybe a list of not too long, maybe 5 or 10 things. If there are people in your life who just have bad attitudes about money, or if every time that you're doing great someone demotivates you, then it's time to either talk to that person or stop talking to that person and cut them out of your life. Maybe you have an attitude or a saying or obligations, or maybe you tell yourself that you can't make X amount of dollars because you are limited on time. Well, the answer is not to blame that situation, but to either make it where it doesn't matter and you're okay with it, or to find a way around it. And so maybe if you only have 1 hour per day to focus on your online business, well, then you need to make the best out of that hour and outsource a lot of things. And it might mean that your business is growing slower than you'd like to, or it might mean that if you only have an hour a day, then you can cut out an hour or two of TV time every day, and now you have 3 hours a day, and maybe you only watch TV on weekends. Provide real value for others. This is an excellent motivator, especially if you feel like things don't really matter and why am I writing a book? Well, you're writing a book, for example, on how to lose weight because other people are going to buy this book and use it, and nothing's worked for them in the past, but it has worked for them with the information that you provided. And even on another side of the coin, once you build up the amount of money that you want, or you have a bunch of extra money in the bank, well, then you can go ahead and donate to whatever cause you want. So now you're that person where you have money, but you're not the root of all evil. Cut out the negative people and negative customers in your life because they'll drag you down. And I mean, easier said than done. But if you can't avoid that, or if there are certain people that you can't eliminate completely, then after you talk to them, listen to some kind of self-help, or like go for a walk or do something to reset yourself after talking to those negative people, because you don't want to become like them. And write down a daily metric for how you're doing, as in, how much money did you make today? How many sales did you make today? How much content did you create today? And a good place to do this is at 4dailytasks.com/group. This is a Facebook group where we list the 4 actions we're going to take today. Then we go back and make a note if we completed them or not. And then finally, and this is kind of it's weird and simple, but write down the issues you have in order to correct them. So if you know that your issue is that you're gossiping too much, you're having too much negative self-talk, then write down the not a ton. I'm not saying write a big long journal entry, but write down maybe like a phrase or sentence that keeps on nagging you in your head. And I'm not saying to write it down that way you keep fixating on that, but write it down. So if you keep saying that money is the root of all evil, or it takes money to make money, or that all internet marketers are scammers, write that down and then draw a line over to something that would be a better thing to say instead, right? So if you say something like, well, um, if you keep telling yourself for whatever reason that you're not going to make money online, well then you can replace that negative self-talk with something like, a lot of people make money online, and I just need to focus on my first $100. Or like we said, if you say that no one's making money online, well then find even one person that you can prove makes money online. And so the self-talk area, I think, has been my big focus lately, because I mean there are like psychological and NLP kind of silly tricks you can do, like try to visualize what hitting your goals means, right? Or visualize what having $1 million means, and then you could visualize what your bank account looks like now and try to transmorph it. And that works if you're a visual person, or listen to that nagging voice telling you that you can't do it and change the voice. And that works if you're an audio person. But what has been helping me are the words, are the meaning, because I mean the imagination factor of it, the visualizing stuff like that, that's kind of superficial. What I'm thinking about are the things that persist, the words and the phrases that just hang around in my head over and over again. And so there are these things, there are these questions that we can ask, right? So in any kind of situation, we can ask questions to poke, that we have a thought in our head, this bad self-talk. We want to poke holes in it. We want it to go away. If we just try to ignore it or say that's not true, then it's going to persist even harder. So instead we have to poke holes in it and transform it into something else. So we can ask questions for clarification, for assumption, evidence, perspective, consequences, and context. So we could ask ourselves, well, if we have a certain belief about money that, okay, well, I'll never make more than $250,000 a year, well, then why would you say that? Where did that come from? What assumptions can we assume instead? Maybe you can think about, well, instead of saying I'll never make $250,000 a year, say I'll never make 260. I'll never make 275, and then now you've raised the ceiling. Ask yourself about evidence. So, what's an example of someone who's made more than $250,000 a year, and then that is the example you follow? Or change your perspective. What would be an alternative? What would be an alternative to this way of thinking? Or my thinking always is, if you have a certain income goal, like 250,000, what helps me is to, number one, break it up into 12-month sections. So let me bust out my calculator here. So we'll say 250,000 is $20,000 per month. I hope I got the math on that right. So $20,000 a month, if we divide that again, that's about $700 per day. Okay, now, so we take the number, divide it into 12 months, got that. Now we divide that into 30-day increments, and now we're starting to get a handle on that. And then I ask myself, well, what price point and how many sales would I have to make per day? So if we just sold 7 copies of a $100 or $97 product, that would give us the $250,000 goal that we wanted. And where does 10x come into play with this? Well, the 10x into play with this, where we can say, I'm going to have upsells, I'll have a coaching program, I'll have some kind of a recurring income stream, some kind of a membership site. And those are all nice to have later in the future, but that is how we can we can not over plan, but over effort those goals that we wanted to get. And then where 80/20 comes into play here is the idea of you experiment first, figure out the system, and then you remove parts of the system to make it easier, but you can only change one variable at a time. So if somebody says, well, I want to make all this money, but I also only want to put in 30 minutes a day, well, that's not going to happen at the same time. You can only change one variable at a time. So what you have to figure out first is, how do I make the money? How do I build the list? How do I build the business? How do I make the products, make the books, get the volume coming in, get the joint venture partners, all that stuff. So early on, you can't you can't be limiting the amount of time you put into it. You might have to put in long hours. Not to say that you're staring at the computer screen for 12 hours. I mean, if you're kind of hitting a wall or burned out, leave the computer and come back. But you can only change one variable at a time. So that means that you have to say, okay, well, I'm not going to be concerned too much about the 10-minute, 20-minute, 30-minute a day total stuff right now. I'm going to make the money, and then once I figure out what I'm doing that's working, and once the traffic is flowing, then I can scale back. And I see a lot of people where they try to have their cake and eat it too. They try to do both things at the same time. It doesn't work. So anyway, we said, why do you say that statement? What could we assume instead? What's an example of that? What would be an alternative? And then how does it affect other things? So if the problem is that you say, well, I there's no way I can make more than X number of dollars per year, well, what that affects is that you're stressed out. Now you have to be checking your bank account all the time. Now you're wasting even more time when you could have just had everything set up on automatic payments. And then finally, context. What does it mean, and where does this question even come from in the first place? Maybe you say that, maybe you can like blame your parents. Maybe your parents had bad ideas about money. Maybe your parents were poor and you don't want to get to that point. Or maybe you were poor at one point and you have somewhat of a Great Depression syndrome where no amount of money is enough. And so I've seen basically a lot of advice and things like that about money mindset and your relationship with money, and it gets pretty weird pretty dang fast. I've seen stuff that says things like, well, it's like being in a relationship, and what you have to do is sometimes take your significant other out for a nice dinner, basically. And so then sometimes you and your significant other break up, and sometimes you and your significant other move to the next level. And I'm thinking, but you're talking about money and you're really stretching it, trying to think about how to compare being in a relationship to handling money. And I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I just find that really silly. Or I see things that say, well, you need to categorize yourself. And is your tendency to be the overspender who just like any amount of money in the bank, you just have to spend it till it's at zero? Or are you the kind of person that you can't spend anything, and even if you had 100 grand in the bank, you're still eating Pop Tarts for dinner? And I found that kind of not very helpful as well. So what I found helpful was this negative self-talk stuff. So then we start off with those questions, right? I listed those 6 Socratic questions, they're called. And then we realized, well, if we cross out some and then rearrange them, then they can apply pretty well to whatever hangups we have, whatever bad self-talk we have. And so here are the 4 questions. Number 1, what's the evidence for this belief about money? Number 2, does this belief about money always hold true, or has it ever been wrong? Number 3, does this take the big picture into account, both positive and negative? And then number 4, are you being fully objective, and where did this idea come from, or is it only emotional? So if we say that no one ever makes more than $250,000, then we can say, well, what's the evidence for this? We can easily find people. And the thing about money is that not everyone is showing their bank account to you. And the ones that are making a lot of money, I mean, whether we're talking about internet marketing or not, but the ones that are making good money, they're shutting up about it. They're not telling you about it because, well, why would they? They're focused more about themselves than about bragging. So the first question we asked was, what's the evidence for this? If you say, I can't make this amount of money, or no one makes this amount of money, well, what's the evidence for that? And I mean, let's just give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, okay? So sure, there are a lot of people on the internet who don't make a lot of money, and a lot of the reason, I mean, there is a certain amount of bad luck, but if you have bad luck, take some more actions and eventually you'll have better luck. Funny how that works out. Or if you say some people aren't making $250,000 a year, we can look at their habits, look at their behaviors. And I would say that the biggest problem is that they just can't complete things. It's not necessarily a matter of having a bad attitude or choosing the wrong niche or having the wrong product, but they get 95% of the way there, quit, start over. So I say, okay, well, it is true that's a lot of people, and maybe even a huge majority of people don't even make a dollar online. But there are reasons why that happens, and the reasons are usually because they don't finish. Now, number two, does this always hold true, or has it ever been wrong? So we say 250K. All right, people have made. Can we find one person that's made more than that? Or have you ever had a $1,000 day? Well, if you had a $1,000 day, well, if every day was like that, that would be $365,000 a year. So you would have surpassed that goal. And if your hangups are things like, okay, well, it's never true because I get overtaxed and all this and that, well, the answer to that is 10x. The answer to that is if you don't like how much money you're being taxed at 250, then make 500 so that way you can make up the difference. And still, you'll be taxed more, but that's the fact of life. You can't avoid death and taxes. Number three, does this take the big picture into account, both positive and negative? So if you think money's evil, if you think that money doesn't matter, well, if you had more money than you needed, and I'm not saying gobs and gobs, but more than you needed, then your lifestyle would be a heck of a lot better. I'm not saying that you would, I mean, maybe you don't want to have a bigger house, but if you had more money in the bank, you wouldn't have to worry about if the deck broke or if a step broke or if a door broke or if the garage door broke. You wouldn't have to stress out anymore, and that would be the big picture. And if you, and once again, if you say that money is the root of all evil, well then you can be the person where if you have money you donate it to whatever cause that you want. And then finally, are you being fully objective? Where did this idea come from, or is it only emotional? So maybe your past experiences, or your parents, or someone in your life told you or beat you down, and many times it's what it is. Someone else was projecting their own bad attitude about money, and they knew that they were never going to have anything great. So instead of helping you along, they would just rather beat you down. So, as we're winding down today's call, if you have any kind of negative self talk in your mind, whether it's about money or not, I want you to ask yourself if you tend to be more of a worrier, a critic, a victim, or a perfectionist. So a worrier always thinks about the worst case scenario and thinks about all the possible what ifs, and they're usually bad. The critic has low self-esteem and you keep judging yourself and ignoring the good things in your life. The victim tells yourself that you're helpless and powerless and things happen to you. And the perfectionist says not necessarily you that you're judging yourself, but that you should be working harder, and that when things don't work out, then that's your own fault. So I mean, that's the question: is are you some combination of that, or which of these is the most prevalent with you? The worrier, where you overestimate the bad; the critic, where you ignore positive qualities; the victim, where you feel powerless, that it's just never going to change; or the perfectionist, where you are intolerant of mistakes and setbacks. Well, if you're the worrier and you keep asking yourself, what if, change that what if phrase that you keep thinking of, that you've written down the sentence on a piece of paper, change that what if into so what. So if you say, if I put out this product, this book, this course, and it fails, what if it fails? Well, the answer is so what? Then you adjust from there. If you ask yourself, well, you're not the best public speaker and you could be better in that. Well, how about I tell myself that I'm okay with the way I am, and I can research all kinds of public speakers who have speech impediments or don't talk very well or still get nervous, and I can be armed with the facts. And what's kind of something to keep in mind too is that you need to have a lot of facts to overpower even a little bit of emotion. Emotion is very powerful, and if you have your mind made up in a certain set, then you have to have a lot of facts. So you have to really try to out logic yourself in order to change even a little bit of that emotion. But if you know that, then you know you can be armed with the facts. If you're the victim type of self-negative talker where you just get in that depression that it's just too difficult, my response to that is one step at a time for you. If you're so discouraged and you say, well, I'll never make $1 million because that's a huge number, just focus today or focus this month on just making $10 online. Consider this month more or less a wash, other than that $10 you want to earn. And then next month you can increase it to $100 and don't even think about getting it past that point, but one step at a time. And if you're a perfectionist and you get burned out, you need to find a way to tell yourself that it's okay to make mistakes, and do some research and find examples of people who've made mistakes. You look at, I don't know, how many times Donald Trump has gone bankrupt or almost gone bankrupt, or the Colonel Sanders from KFC, he didn't get his big break till he was 65, or Thomas Edison screwed up 10,000 times before he made the light bulb. All that cheesy, overdone stuff, but it's cheesy and overdone because it persists, it lasts, and that is what has helped many different people to get to where they need to go. So think about these kinds of things. Think about why you started. Think about what you were getting away from when you built this internet marketing business. Think about what led you to get here. And maybe it was just a matter of backsliding. Maybe when you switched gears in your life and you quit that job and you built your internet marketing business, you told yourself, I really have to hustle. I really have to focus. I'm taking this seriously now. And then you did, and then you built your income up to a certain level, and then you got comfortable and lazy and then backslid back into old habits. So it's time to reboot, time to reinvigorate, time to, at the very least, write down where you're at. Write down numbers, write down the thoughts, words, sentences, phrases in your head, and then that way you can identify the real problem and then not ignore and not just say no to, but adjust and transform those bad thoughts into good thoughts. I hope that makes sense. 80-20, 10x, break out of your money zone, take that foot off the brake and uninstall those negative money beliefs. This has been the Robert Plank Show, episode 87. Visit us at robertplank.com and rate and review us at robertplankshow.com/iTunes. Thanks, and I'll talk to you again very soon.